This video is brought to you by Squarespace, the best place to build a beautiful website. If you've ever played one of those find the out of place object games like Where's Waldo or one of the I Spy games, then you are ready for this video where you need to spot the CG. For example, if I showed you a shot like this, you'd say obviously the CG is one of the doubles because he stood in one place, then another, masked out both sections, and then composited everything together because at the end of the day you're not a twin, which is true, I'm a triplet. So as this is your first shot, I'm going to give you a couple pass-throughs through it. There's going to be a progress bar below that tells you how much time you have to spot the CG, but I'll also give you a hint. There are 4 things, in some sense, that are incorrect with this shot. Can you find them? Can you find them before progress runs out? Feel free to pause the video, go frame by frame, whatever it is you need to do. But now I'm gonna spoil it. The first thing is these cones in the background. You're gonna notice that they're a different color from everything else. And you know, while these cones do exist in real life, this is just color correction. So what I did for this shot is I tracked each cone individually just using a tracker, which lets me stick on a mask that basically says isolate this cone and move with the motion of the cone. And then instead of just using like a color correct node by changing the hue and all this, which would kind of fuck up the whole thing, I instead used a hue curves node, which kind of lets you isolate a certain color and say only manipulate this one. So in this case, I took the reds and orange like hues and said turn them into yellow, which lets me, you know, isolate these cones. And by the way, if an object or a person, in this case a person, passes through, you gotta mask that. Otherwise, the skin tone's gonna change and kind of make it not, it makes it obvious. Another small detail in the background before we get to the big stuff, you're gonna notice that this person I keep referring to, first of all, walks into the shot with white shoes and then walks back into the shot with Kanye Yeezys. Whoa, how'd he do that? Again, super simple thing. I just took an image of Yeezys, cut out like anything that shouldn't be in there, track this onto the shoe, which looks pretty good, but then you want to add in some motion blur. Some grid warp is actually the most important thing because then you can actually get the deformation of the foot movement. And you know, if you're not looking for it, it looks very, very believable. So this person has Yeezys. Now for the big stuff, which is probably the thing you were expecting. All these cones in the background, some of them are fake, but maybe not the ones you were expecting. So these are the 2 cones that are fake. The way I did this is I took the shot, did a 3D track on it so that I could actually put objects in the scene in 3D and it moves with the camera. I then needed a 3D model of a cone that looks like these cones specifically in the gas station, so it kind of looks like everything melts together. And the original plan was to take a bunch of photos around this thing in a circle so I could then plug this through some photogrammetry software and get just a hyper realistic thing. But when I tried to process it, it kept cutting it off at the top, so I went away with that idea and instead actually just used a single photo to model this. I just modeled it from the perspective of the camera, just projected the texture onto it, which does look incorrect if you look behind the model, but you just rotate it so that part doesn't face you. And if you look pretty closely on the rim of the cone, you can see some of that bled through anyways. But that should give you a pretty realistic cone that you kind of match the lighting, the color correction and all that, and you have cones in your scene. And again, if an object goes in the foreground, you gotta mask it. Otherwise, the which object in front of another kind of thing is ruined. Finally, my favorite thing that I didn't know if it would look realistic or not, but I think it came through pretty well, is the puddles. This shot was shot on a dry day, which is like obvious if you look at everything else, but I'm like, fuck it, we'll put some puddles. Maybe people will believe it since it's a gas station and, you know, water puddles up there. But anyways, the way I did this is very similar to the last thing where we have the 3D track, so now I can put in a bunch of planes in our 3D scene. And the question is, how do I give this thing a material that looks like a plane? So what I went with is I basically made a procedural material that's a circle, that's distorted, that turns it into a puddle. And I said, wherever this white mask exists, just make it super reflective, super metallic, and make it transparent everywhere else. And then the big secret to making this work is you need an HDRI environment that kind of matches, you know, the scene that you're in, so you're actually reflecting the correct things. And also you want to be using Fresnel, which is kind of like the angle that you view something to say this is how reflective it's going to be. Because if you look at a puddle top down, it's not going to be as reflective as if you look at it from like a distance where the angle is almost like perfectly like with the thing. Either way, the angle that you're viewing it with, which, you know, we have an animated camera for, actually affects it. So there you go, shot number 1. Some of the cones were fake, some of the cones were color corrected, the Yeezys, and also the puddles. How many did you get? I don't care. Moving on to shot number 2. Okay, we're now in the territory of shot number 2. Can you spot the real stuff? Can you spot the fake stuff? And can you do so before the progress bar dissipates? So, yeah, there's the shot. I'll give you a hint. There are 3 things in this shot that are not real, that are CG. And, you're out of time, so let me spoil it for you. So the first thing you're probably noticing is this barrel off to the side that just kind of looks out of place. And if you think that's CG, well, you're kind of correct, but really it's a bit more than that. It's the whole corridor or the whole space that's fake. fake. I just replaced the window with this thing. And to do this, I basically repeated the same process as before of doing a 3D track of the shot so I could put in 3D objects, and then I made a corridor using a bunch of image textures and stuff like that from the scene so it looks realistic. And the problem I ran into is when I tried to render this, I realized that you could actually see the outside or the back face of the corridor, so if you superimpose that, it just kind of looks weird. So the solution to that is use the back facing, which has one color on one side and one color. Either way, use back facing to say on one side of this corridor, make it look like a corridor, and on the other side, use a holdout shader, which is kind of like a thing a bit beyond transparency. What it lets you do is it kind of lets you have a window into a world without seeing from around it, is the point. So yes, the entire corridor was fake. Did I trick you? I don't know. Moving on to the next thing. If you focus on this door, you're gonna notice that actually I removed something. I didn't add anything. The original shot had a trespassing sign, which kind of rubbed me the wrong way, or actually it was a no trespassing sign. I just wanted to remove that. So the way I did it is I just did a planar track on the door, so I now know the motion of this door, where it's moving, etc. I then just made a clean plate in what is essentially Photoshop, where I just clone stamp out the sign. I track that thing onto it using the planar track and only have it be visible in some of the area, and that's how you basically track a clean plate so that the object is removed. In a similar vein, you're gonna notice that this like wooden barrier thing, point is originally it had some text and I removed that as well using a similar process but something a bit different. This time I did a planar track and actually did the steady command, which will stabilize that section and make all the other footage morph. Point being, we now have the stabilized thing that we can make a clean plate since it doesn't move and it's a nice area to work in. And then if we just take the transform and apply it again, but this time inverted, we've done transformation, clone stamp, and then inverse transformation, which in effect makes it look like it's removed in a similar process, but it's a bit different. So yes, in this shot, there were two things that you really couldn't have guessed because they were removed, but that's kind of the point of CG. A lot of it is actually removing stuff, not adding it. So yes, this is an impossible game. Moving on to shot number 3, final shot. Okay, this is your final opportunity. There are no more after this. This is shot number 3, the finale. Can you figure out what is real? What is CG? You have a bit more progress left, so take a good look at it. I'm gonna give you a hint. There's only one thing in this shot that is fake. And your time is up, so let me reveal it. This shot is entirely fake. Nothing in here is real. This is a complete, it's a 3D render completely, is what I'm trying to say. So, did I fool you? So you may be able to spot the CG, or honestly, you probably can't. That was the point I was trying to prove. But can you spot a good deal when I tell you about it? Well, let's find out. This video is sponsored by Squarespace. If you are in the market for making your own website, you do not want to code it yourself. It is a hassle. You need to learn a lot of stuff. It's just not worth the time or the effort. You want to be using something like Squarespace, which has a bunch of templates, drag and drop. You don't need to know anything about anything. You just pick something that looks good and you design your own website. I remember a while ago when I was making www.cgmatter.com, I'm like, oh, I'm gonna make it myself, and I'm like, yeah, I can't do this. So I use Squarespace, and I'm currently using Squarespace, and I honestly like the way my website looks, so this is an easy recommendation for me. Some stuff that comes with Squarespace is analytics, so you can track who and how many and where people are coming from to your website, which is useful information for whatever it is you're trying to do. Squarespace also offers email campaigns, so you can send out a personal or brand message to the, the audience, the people who go to your website. So basically, you know who's coming to your website and you know how to send a message to the people who go to your website. It's a good business. And while Squarespace is already affordable at an annual subscription at less than $10 a month, I am here, why? To make the deal sweeter. You, yes you, can click my link in the description to save 10% off your first purchase of a website or domain. So try out Squarespace, great way to build a website.